Hello, and welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. I'm your guest host, travel writer Laurie McAndish King. You may have heard my interviews before on the Women's Eye or read my travel books or articles. Thanks for joining me again today. This chat is part of our travel series, talking with women who are passionate about getting out there and seeing the world. We're finding out how women can change the world through travel and how it can change them. I'm excited about my guest today. She's Pardis Mahdavi, an Iranian-American scholar, author, journalist, and former university president. Pardis left her job in academia because she discovered something she believed could make even more of a positive difference in the world. I'm so glad to be talking to you, Pardis. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Laurie. It's an absolute honor to be here with you all on the Women's Eye.
Where are you joining us from today?
Today, I'm joining you from my home in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, Scottsdale. Oh, and what's it like there? Do you have monsoons this time of year? What's the weather like there?
You know, it's a great question, Laurie. I always say that the most magical time to be in Arizona is January through May. So it is absolutely gorgeous out right now.
Oh,
It's 75 degrees and sunny. No rain, not a cloud in the sky. I got to say, every time I go outside, I'm so grateful for this bright blue sky that's out here in Arizona. These desert skies are amazing.
yes, yeah. Oh, I could just imagine that.
Yeah.
Here on the Women's Eye, you'll all meet women like Pardis who are achieving their dreams and making a difference in the world. But first, this episode is brought to you by the Casco Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. Casco's president, Catherine Scrivano, started her business to help people like you create the financial strength to achieve their dreams. Pardis, you love to travel and you have such an interesting background. You've written a lot. You've written about migration, gender, sexuality, human trafficking, human rights, public health. You've had a career in academia, and now you're focused on taking people on transformational retreats for personal growth. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to make that shift.
Thanks so much, Laurie. Yeah, I describe myself as a recovering academic. So, 25 years, I felt like that was giving it the good college try, as they say.
Yeah.
25 years in the academy. And as you mentioned earlier, I was a professor for many years. Actually, leading up to that, I did my PhD in medical anthropology at Columbia University, picked up a couple masters. And then I was a professor for many years at Pomona College, kind of rose the ranks to being a dean. Became a dean at the University of Denver, a dean at Arizona State University, provost at the University of Montana, president at the University of La Verne.
Wow.
Down last
That's a really distinguished career.
So, I definitely felt that I had seen academia from many different sides, many different vantage points. I think for me, the anchoring theme is the anthropologist in me, right? I am absolutely a medical anthropologist. And for people who don't know what that is, medical anthropology is really the study of how cultures impact how we view and make decisions about our bodies, our minds, and our souls. So it encapsulates everything from social determinants of health, et cetera, to complementary and alternative medicine, shamanism. My particular area of focus within medical anthropology was sexuality and looking at how sexuality both impacts and is impacted by culture, politics, society, right? And so, my very first book was on sexual revolution in Iran. I've always been fascinated between the sort of connections between culture, mind, and body. And so, I definitely enjoyed. I think the thing that gives me the most joy in the world are two things, really, two twin things. One is writing, and the other is travel. So I think you probably have the best job there is.
I totally relate. Yeah.
And so as an anthropologist, that was one way for me of really making sense of the world and really getting me out into the world. For me, writing is the way I make sense of everything I'm seeing and experiencing. But having the excuse of being an anthropologist and having the excuse of saying I get to, it's my profession to turn up in a place like Madagascar and write a book about it. It's my profession to turn up in at an underground, sexual revolution organizing party in Tehran. That's part of my, job.
Tough job, but somebody has to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So, but I did make that difficult decision to leave about a year ago. I think it was coming for a little bit longer. For me, the higher up I rose in academia in terms of leadership positions, and, I very much took on these different leadership positions with a desire to serve, right? When I was a professor, I started noticing that a lot of our students were feeling out of alignment. They were feeling like their needs weren't being met. And I've always been really passionate about education. And so I wanted to serve. And then, after some time, I felt that I was getting out of alignment personally. And, part of that was one of the things about being a leader, about being a dean or a provost or a president is you can't travel that much, and so between COVID and between the leadership demands, I was getting farther and farther away from what my passions were, my purpose was, which was personal growth and exploration through exploration of other cultures, right? That's why I went and got as an undergrad, I studied diplomacy and world affairs. I worked for my first job was working for the United Nations. I worked for the United Nations for
Oh
many
my
years.
goodness.
Yeah, since
Wow.
1999.
Yeah.
Yeah, from 1999, actually 1998, excuse me, from 1998 to 2006. So while, during my junior year of undergrad and then all through my graduate work from 2000 to 2006, I worked for different United Nations agencies. And for me, I've always been passionate about building bridges. I see myself as a bridge, right? I see myself as a bridge between cultures. Sometimes I'm a bridge between aspects of society. That's what that sort of education was about, those roles in education. I was trying to translate higher ed to society, society to higher ed, back and forth.
So what did you write? I want to know about your books because I wasn't quite as aware of them. Tell me, and I also didn't know you'd gone to you'd studied and written about Madagascar, which is a place that's super close to my heart. Oh my gosh, I love that country.
Really? Yes.
Yeah. But tell me a little bit about your books because I would like to know about those.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got 9 books. People can learn about those on my website. My most recent book came out last week, actually. The timing of this.
Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you. Yes. Actually, it's this. The book is called Riding. I'm an avid horsewoman. It's in my blood. It's in the veins. My grandmother on my father's side was a horsewoman warrior. She was her story actually is in the book I wrote just before Riding, which is called Book of Queens. Actually, I'll have that one here too. And Book of Queens is, as the subtitle suggests, the true story of the Middle Eastern horsewoman who fought the war on terror. And it's the story of my grandmother who would smuggle women from Iran to Afghanistan, women who were in domestic violence situations. She would smuggle them from Iran to Afghanistan on horseback by getting the horses drunk on homemade whiskey. So they would be calm at the border crossing into Afghanistan.
Oh my God.
And those women formed an all-female army that fought alongside of the U.S. Green Berets during the war on terror. They fought the Taliban during the war on terror.
Oh my gosh.
So it's in the blood. The horse girl thing is in the blood. And if you look at Persian culture, dating back thousands of years, horses have been a really big part of our culture, our lineage, and horsewomanship and horsewomen warriors. You go back all the way to the Shahnameh, which is the Book of Kings. I named my book Book of Queens because I liked the women in that epic.
Yeah.
But those women were horsewomen warriors. I have always loved horses. I've always been an avid horsewoman. And I wrote my latest book, Riding, is actually about how my riding impacts my writing and how my writing impacts my riding.
Oh my goodness.
And so
I would never have thought of that connection at all. I'm not a horse person, but fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to, I have a lot of reading ahead of me, I guess.
Yeah. But so my books have been, I actually started out by writing, about Iran's sexual revolution, and then started going into more areas around sexual politics, things like sort of maybe the darker side of human trafficking, et cetera. And so what had taken me to Madagascar is 4 of my books are on human trafficking, and I was part of getting a group of 47 women, survivors of trafficking, home from Kuwait back to Madagascar, along with their babies,
Oh my
some
gosh.
years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're doing a whole other thing, which is these transformational retreats, and you've called your company Entheon. Can you
Mhm.
tell listeners a little bit about what does that word mean and why did you choose to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So entheon as a word, it actually comes from, the Greek word for theos or knowledge, right? Theos, and then en is within. So entheon means the knowledge within, and entheon as a concept, when if you Google it, you just Google entheon, what you'll come up with is the journey to find the creator within, right? To find that creator.
Oh,
So for me, we talk a lot about journeying with purpose, right? The difference between traveling and journeying, right?
yeah.
And having this intention. You go to a place, you make a journey, sometimes it's a pilgrimage. You make a journey to Mount Everest, you can make a, or you can go just travel, I think the difference is really the intentionality, how you're approaching the experience. And so for me, I love the concept of journeying and bringing journeying forward. But
Mhm.
I also thought it was important that, because one of the things that over 25 years of teaching and working with students, one of the things that has always resonated for them, as I always get their feedback, is they talk to me about one of the things they love about anthropology is you make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. So everybody knows anthropology is about making the strange familiar. It's like, okay, you have an anthropologist, Indiana Jones, whatever, you're writing about this, but it's also about making the familiar strange. And one of the things I've
Huh.
always loved about anthropology is you're actually opening up um, channels to yourself. Like when you go out and travel, you're also learning a lot about yourself. You're learning about yourself through learning about another culture. You're learning about yourself through immersing yourself in another place. And so for me,
Yeah,
Entheon.
give me an example, if you could, of that. Like how, yeah, just maybe something a little bit more specific. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, many of us have kids. Maybe our listeners can resonate. I'm a mom. I'm a single
Yep.
mom. I've got 3 kids. And I will say to you that probably my most profound parenting experiences have been when I travel with my children.
Huh.
And so, just for example, I had the opportunity to live in Singapore for a year when my kids were little. And we went to Angkor Wat, right? We went to Cambodia with the kids.
Mhm.
And watching, like at the time I only had 2, watching the 2 of them explore and discover Angkor in such different ways and in such different ways from me really helped me to understand so much. And then watching them and then watching how a lot of the local women were parenting their kids. It gave me a lot of insights into how can you be present with your kids and parent with love, but also allow them the autonomy. I would watch these moms and they would let their kids like scamper and scramble all over the room, which is amazing that you can do that, right? And up until that point, I've been kind of a nervous mom. This is now like 8 years ago now. I was kind of a nervous mom. I was like, don't let him climb there, and don't. But then I was watching all these women do this, and I'm like, God, and these kids were just having such absolute joy, and the moms were so relaxed, and I thought, like I'm inflicting this on myself. Like
Yeah.
I am creating the parenting
And
chaos
your kids.
myself
You're inflicting it on your children too. Yeah.
and on my children.
Yeah.
So it gave me insights about myself. Like some of the
Yeah.
greatest insights I've ever had about myself, or many people I've met have said the greatest insights they've had about themselves is actually when they remove themselves from their everyday environment. That gives them the brain space really to start to think differently. It allows creativity, it allows ideas to come in.
And it changes the context too. I think that's really important to get into a different context in order to be
Exactly.
more creative.
Exactly.
And travel seems like is one of the best, easiest, one of the best ways to do that. Yeah.
Exactly.
I can
Exactly.
relate to what you're saying. I lived in Australia for a year when my son was 10 years old. And I wasn't really sure whether it was going to be a good idea or not. I thought, pulling him out of his school and away from his friends, and he's going to have all this adjustment to make. And it turned out to be a fabulous idea. And I think what we're talking about now is how important it is to take your kids places. It's super important to travel for children to
Absolutely.
understand their place in the world, as well as for us to get a sense of how many other ways there are to live. Um, we just take our own culture for granted.
Right,
Don't
right.
realize there's so many other ways to do things. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I think I've always loved realizing is no matter where I go, there are so many commonalities too, right? Like no matter where you go, even when you end up in places, I tell people, I was in Rapa Nui, right, which is Easter Island off the coast of Chile, one of the most remote islands, places in the world. And I was there with my youngest son. And it was so funny. Like I was nursing my son at the time and I was having a hard time and it was like I was fumbling. And there was a local woman and she was sitting next to me. It was Women's Day and we were just there for a gathering. She was having the exact same problem. And we looked at each other and we just had this fantastic connective moment of like, God, this is really hard. Right. Because it was, so I also feel that, in this world where we can all feel really disconnected and in this world where so many of us feel so lonely, it's kind of odd to think that travel can bring you connection and community, but that's also why I started Entheon, because I believe that you can actually experience the world as a way to make and form new community. And in a world where we can all feel so alone so much, being able to find belonging in the most unlikely places, unlikely corners of the world, that to me is one of the greatest gifts, I think, as we explore uncertain times.
Well, I think one of the things that you do in your journeys is really make a point of connecting with local people. How do you do that? What is that like on a trip?
Yeah. So I think we try to build community in a couple of ways. I think the first is we try to build community. When we get a group of people who are going to go on a trip together, we like to actually have some preparatory calls. We have some preparatory Zooms, right? So people get to know each other and they start to feel connected to each other. We're all planning this trip. Build some excitement. It also builds a level of comfort. Who am I going to be with? Who am I going to be around? Let's get to know each other. And it allows you to sort of because you're going in this container, right? The trip is a container. It also allows people to be really vulnerable in a way that they might not be in their day-to-day life. I mean, I've had participants say to me, I shared more with you all who are in some ways a group of strangers
Yeah.
than I share with my husband of 20 years,
Yeah.
So we try to build that community. And then we try to take that community and connect it with the communities in the countries, in the places we go to, right? So as you know, so often people will travel somewhere, they stay in a hotel, they don't really interact with people at the local level. They're just there. And especially I've noticed women who travel alone. This is like, I'm here, I'm in a hotel. I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get out there. How do I
Scary.
get
It
out
can be
there?
scary. Yeah.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're in an unfamiliar
And
place, you don't know what's safe and what isn't safe, or yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we really try to take all of that out of it so that people know that, we got you, you're safe. And then we really try to look at, what are some of the most unique and distinctive approaches and bodies of knowledge. We would say epistemologies. What are the kind of bodies of knowledge coming out of these places? So for instance, if you're going to go to India, of course you're going to want to see the Taj Mahal, et cetera. But India is also the home and the birthplace of, yoga and Ayurveda. And how can you go and experience India, which there's a lot going on in India, right? It can be, there's
Yeah.
fast moving, et cetera. How can you do that, but also engage and interact in a meaningful way? The same with, let's say you're going to Thailand. How can you have an experience and be part of, I call it a restorative approach to travel? I mean, you and I both know travel like is kind of like you're constantly chipping away at a house that never gets remodeled, right? It can be very extractive. So now you're going to go to Thailand. Rather than go and ride an elephant, maybe we will take you to volunteer at an elephant sanctuary. Now you get to feed and bathe an elephant, right? It's that experience of sitting with rather than coming and overlaying, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of the work we're doing with shamans. So with Peru, right? Peru is definitely, very long heritage and lineage of shamans.
Yeah.
And, how can we go and really learn and sit with, rather than just going and, okay, I walked, check box checked, I walked the Inca Trail, I saw Machu Picchu. Yes, you can go and you can be, can go to Machu Picchu. And can you then like maybe either give back, where you're volunteering, you're engaged, or, sit and learn something or have a community exchange. You get to meet local folks, you get to meet, village elders, etc., people who have been carrying and passing the stories of this land. Again, in the world that we live in, the 2025 world, we're so, we get a lot of information, but it's sort of disconnected, right? And how can you reconnect and start to really hear the stories speak? I talk about it as a way of cultural preservation. We talk a lot about ecological preservation, right? We talk a lot about that need for conservation, ecological conservation, which is very necessary. And I would say an interlocking theme there is cultural preservation, because you have people who've, for thousands of years, the stewardship of the land and the history has been passed. So why not, if you're going to travel, why not get to be exposed to these stories and then come home with so much more richness and a deeper connection to the earth and to culture, you know?
I love that. I'm ready to sign up, Pardis. Um, Tell me a little bit more. What are the places that you go, and what are some of the daily activities like?
Absolutely. So I've mentioned India, I've mentioned Peru. I mean, you're getting a sense for the sort of, people talk about it as kind of almost like sacred sites, places that are imbued
Yeah.
with a lot of ancient wisdom. We're putting together a trip in Bhutan. And there, just to your point of what would a day look like? We would be waking up, meditating with the monks, doing some meditative work. And then, typically offer like a 2-hour workshop in the morning, that helps us integrate the knowledge, bring in some local knowledge keepers and some wise men, wise
Ooh,
women, wise people, bring them
yeah.
in. And then taking a break, and then offering to go on a hike or maybe a walk or a contemplative walk or some yoga. And then that evening coming together for dinner, either at a local restaurant or actually at we stay often at retreat centers,
Mhm.
where we partner with local chefs so that we can eat the local cuisine,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
and get to really learn and engage with all aspects of the culture in a really meaningful way.
That's one of the things that I sometimes miss. I was in I was in Namibia recently and staying at these lodges, and we had fabulous food, but it was all Western food.
Right.
So I felt like I felt very removed, and I'm in some ways I'm kind of glad I did, because I know I wouldn't do so well with Namibian food, but I didn't really have too much exposure to it, and I love that you really get into the essence of the culture by meeting people, by eating what the people there eat. That I love the local chef part of it. You don't usually see that on trips.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, and to your point, I think it's really important, because one of the most meaningful ways to engage with a culture is through food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about how are these experiences transformational for participants? What do they find when you stay in touch with them? What do they
Yeah.
find when they come
Yeah.
home?
I think the first thing is people talk a lot about the community. They feel very bonded to the group, to a group of people that they maybe didn't know. Most people don't know each other. It's not like a bunch of couples or kind of people who know each other. No, they're oftentimes people who don't know each other. Maybe two or three of them do, but then they come and they get connected to a group. So they feel that there's this really lovely community that they can stay in touch with, that they can ask questions of, right? Fellow travelers. I love that saying, because it's like, yes, we travel together, but we're also fellow travelers, fellow journeyers on this journey of life. So I think that the community and the connectivity is really important. People talk about. I think the vulnerability. I think it's a place where people can be vulnerable, because of that container. I think that's something people talk a lot about. Um, people say that they really like that they feel very safe, that
Yeah.
that it's very organized. And so there's that sort of safety aspect to it. But the transformational part really comes in, um, allowing yourself to, for a period of time, let go of kind of your day-to-day life or your quote real life, right? To just let go of that for a few days and reconnect with yourself through all of these different modalities, right? I think, when we talk about the alchemy cookbook, right? We're in this moment where there's a sort of the super conscious revolution is here. You've got
Yeah.
breath work on every corner. You've got sound baths, every week. People are looking for different ways to tap into the
Yeah.
super conscious,
Yeah.
which is great. There's also been thousands of years of this happening, and
Yeah.
so this is a great way to expose yourself and really kind of surrender to, how do you actually allow yourself to innovate based on tradition? How do you allow yourself to become a story maker, not just a story dweller? And how is your story interwoven with the stories of all these places? People really appreciate the opportunity to really disconnect from everything else, fully immerse themselves in another way of thinking and being, as a way to really explore all the different parts of themselves. One of the very most common sort of like American myths is like, I've got to find myself, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but everyone outside of the Western context knows we are many selves, right? We have many selves, and how do we meet those different parts of ourselves? How do we get to like bring different parts of ourselves out to dance? I mean, we talk a lot about our shadow and shadow work, but there's also the golden light inside of us. And how do we like pull those different parts of us out? And people talk a lot about these retreats as opportunities to like reignite, and rekindle their connections with themselves.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. uh, at the Women's Eye, we're always looking for things that might make travel easier for people, simpler, more doable, more
Yeah.
pleasurable. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, is making it very doable,
Yeah.
um, a safe space to be vulnerable and to learn where we are, how we fit in the world.
Yeah.
Um, but I always want to ask for travel tips. Do you have any travel tips for listeners?
I do. I mean, other than the, going in community and all that prep work, one of the biggest travel tips I always use, have your travel buddy who is not on the trip with you physically, but is on your trip. So meaning whenever I go anywhere, I always send my itinerary I have two really close friends and they do this, like we all do this with each other. They have my itinerary. I text them when I land at the airport. I text them wherever I go. So they always know where I am. I think that is just like, it's a really nice reassurance right there. And
Mhm.
the other thing I always do is I let the US Embassy know that I'm going to be in whatever country. And there is a sense
Yeah.
of safety that comes with that. I'm sure you do the same thing. Just really this notion of having somebody know where I am, all of that. And then what I try to do is I always try to just keep a little list with me. It could be on your phone. There's apps that do this now too, but keep a list of local resources just to have. I think that just makes it easier, to allow yourself to say, okay, look, if things go horribly wrong, I have these resources. Once you have that, then the magic of uncertainty gets to unfold, because uncertainty is the field of unlimited possibilities. But to be able to fully immerse yourself in that magic, you have to have your kind of certainty protocol tucked away somewhere. That's what we try to
Yeah.
do with Entheon, is say, look, we'll take care of all that stuff. Let all that go. Now let the magic happen. Like now let yourself fully embrace and feel into that magic. So, keeping those things, what you can control, and recognizing, okay, that's it. That's all that I can control is the backup plan. Everything else, it's a lot about surrender. Right. And so once you kind of surrender to that, and once you open yourself to whatever comes is going to come, I think you're going to have an even better experience. And I would say this too, for parents who are traveling with their kids, surrendering is the best way to, have a family vacation that's really meaningful. Recognizing that things aren't always going to go according to plan. You aren't always going to get the travel experience you want, but you will always get the travel experience you need. And I think surrendering to that is really important.
You know, it's almost the inverse of travel tips. It's not, I like those and I'm glad we talked about them, but in some ways, they're not, rather than ways to make travel easier, you're talking about ways that travel makes your life improved. It's sort of the flip of it. Yeah, I really like how that sort of flips
Yeah,
around.
I guess I hadn't thought about it that way, Laurie.
And these,
Yeah.
the retreats sound absolutely fascinating,
Oh,
Pardis.
thank you.
And there's a lot more I'd like to talk to you about, but we're at the end of our time. We need to wrap up. So thanks to all of you listeners for joining us on the Women's Eye podcast. You can connect with Pardis Mahdavi on her website, Pardis, PARDISMAHDAVI.com. And we'll have the link right on the Women's Eye website too. And Pardis is also on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and she's everywhere. So you can find her, PARDISMAHDAVI. Also on the Women's Eye website, you'll find our books about inspiring women, 20 women storytellers and 20 women changemakers. These are both books with stories about women who, like Pardis, have figured out a way to make a positive difference in the world. Remember to rate and review the Women's Eye on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel. And thank you again, Pardis. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed it, Laurie.